Hello and welcome to the Quiet Part podcast, hosted by Mark Hansen, where he explores the unspoken stories hidden in the quiet hours we spend at home. I'm Wendy McConnell. Hey, Mark, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing really good. How are you, Wendy?
I'm good, but it's been a while. I haven't seen you.
Yeah, I had a couple of episodes lined out, and then a bunch of questions started coming in from people that wanted me to answer completely different things. And so I took a step back, reevaluated, got an episode lined out, and here we are. I'm ready to answer the questions that the people have.
All right, knock it out of the park, so to speak, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And while I was on my little podcast break, I took my son to Legoland, and I can't hold it up for the camera because it's not going to focus. But I actually was able to create my own custom Lego person. And since this is primarily a Chick-fil-A and Lego podcast, I wanted to make sure to mention that I now have a little Lego man who is wearing a second comma polo. And we'll have to put this in the show notes or something like that. I am probably too proud of this tiny Lego person, if I'm being completely honest.
So, who had more fun at Legoland, you or your son?
Kristen, if you're listening, Parker had more fun. Parker definitely had more fun. It was not me, that's for sure.
I'm not sure I believe you, Mark.
I didn't have
Okay.
my fingers crossed or anything.
Okay. All right. So, what are we going to be focusing on today then?
Yeah, what we're talking about today is so we're talking to people primarily in their 30s. When I'm talking to my clients, my friends, this peer group of mine, people are saying retirement's so far away. Why do we even have to focus on it? Why is this even on the table? Why is it on the docket? All those kinds of questions, just saying, why do we need to start talking about retirement now? And the best way that I've been explaining this to people recently is I've just been comparing it to a long road trip that you're going to take. As in, like, if you've ever been trying to go somewhere that's really important, but you realize you're behind and now you're speeding to catch up. If you think about that moment where you realize you're behind through the moment where you speed, all the way until you catch up, which might not even happen. But just think about that pressure, the shift, and how different that is. I'm explaining to people that is your journey to retirement. If you don't start on time or carry the appropriate pace, all those driving metaphors that I could put in, pretend like I say all of them. That's what we're talking about. Is that today you feel fine, tomorrow you might not feel fine, and that's why we're going to talk about saving for retirement today.
Now, Mark, let me tell you, I'm a bit older than you, and I'm starting to speed up a little bit because I'm behind. And everybody told me all of the things that you're saying right now. How can we like impress upon how important this truly is?
So we talked in an earlier episode about compound growth, and we said the biggest lever in compound growth, which is your money working for you, the invested money earning the returns, and then those earnings earning more returns. That's called compound growth. That the biggest lever there is time. The more time you have, the better compound growth can be in your favor. So every year that we're not saving for retirement, what we're taking off is the last year of compound growth before we get to retirement. And when you start realizing that, it's okay, fine. In 2024 or whatever year it is, you're not saving for retirement adequately, but you are robbing yourself of that final year of compound growth, which is the biggest year. So every year you give up on the front end for whatever you're giving it up for, good things or bad things, you are giving up your greatest earning years of compound growth on the backside, which are the ones that are 20 years away, 30 years away. They're very far away. They're very hard to conceive of, but that is what you're giving up.
I will tell you that when I was around 25, I got a pension from a job I worked at for a very long time. You know, it was just like a little family restaurant, but they gave us a pension, but I cashed it out. It was $1,700 at the time, which was actually, I was like, wow, there's $1,700 in there. I figured out just from the general rule of thumb of doubling your money every 10 years, at $1,700 today would be $13,600.
Would you enjoy having that money?
Well, yeah. I think I really just spend it on concerts and stuff for the car.
Which is, let's be really clear. I'm totally okay with some of that. As in, I want people having fun today and tomorrow, and that's really what we start talking about when we start talking about this journey. Think about leaving late, and if it's a stressful drive, and you and your kids are just stressed out the whole time. But what if we left a little bit earlier? What if we had a really good time? What if we got hungry and we could stop and have pancakes or whatever we would decide to do on our drive? Having more time gives us more options, and that's what we're going to dive into in this episode.
Okay.
Um, it- what we're, why we're talking about this is because again, time's the greatest asset. We're balancing saving for the future while enjoying life right now, which is very important for these young families. Right, they have young kids in the home. They're business owners. They're managing people at the office. They're managing people in the home. It's important to realize that we're balancing life today and tomorrow, now and in the future. There is nothing in my plan or advice that I think would be beneficial if it's take all your efforts and put them to tomorrow, because today you've got jobs, responsibilities, you've got kids, and we need to strike that balance. But we need to understand that delaying can force you to have to save more in the future, which can make you lose flexibility and take on greater risks than you want to. And that's what's really at risk. The longer we wait, the less options you have on the days moving forward. So, how are we going to? Uh, this is going to get cut out because this doesn't make any sense. Let me say this. If you only hear one thing in this entire podcast, I want it to be this. Okay. So, we're talking about metaphors, we're talking about car drives. Put the car in drive, start moving forward. Okay. Moving forward is better than sitting still. Any version of moving forward is better than sitting still. And starting early gives you more time for the money to grow, like we talked about in the beginning. Starting now gives you more leverage on the compound interest part of this equation. Starting late means you're scrambling with fewer options. And just to put a little bit of math, not to go too deep into it, I'm not trying to put people to sleep, but let's just compare two people, person A and person B. Okay, person A saves $200 a month starting at age 25. By the time they get to 65, assuming a 7% annual return, which is where all my math starts when I'm doing my calculations, assuming a 7% annual return, they've got somewhere $525,000, $530,000 off of $200 a month. Okay. Now, person B saves $400 a month, but they don't start until they are 35. And they save all the way until they're 65. And they're feeling their investments are the exact same. They end with something like $455,000 instead of $525,000. And they saved twice as much. What did they get? Let's talk about the difference. What they got was 10 more years up front from 25 to 35. They didn't save for retirement. Now, could they do something in that time frame that doesn't necessitate? Yes, we could we can destroy this metaphor 100 different ways. But if we just say person B left the car in park and person A put the car in drive, it is much easier potentially to set aside $200 a month from 25 to 65 than to try to set aside $400 a month from 35 to 65. And I hear somebody just said it. Mark, this is $200, this is $400. That's not actually enough money to retire on. I know, but let's just think about how the math relates to itself. That's what I'm trying to say. If if saving twice as much money gets you to a place of lower retirement funds, that's what we're trying to talk about. The delay destroys the math. When you're young, the math is in your favor. The older you get, the less math is in your favor, and you're putting that burden on yourself to take your earned money and set it aside at a higher rate because the math burden switches to your side of the equation. And so, okay, what's at risk here? What are we talking about? Again, delaying gets rid of your flexibility. Starting early, let's talk about that. Starting early gives you flexibility for career changes, kids, major purchases, all of those things. If you get the work done ahead of time, think of the school project, right? You got 6 weeks to get it done. If you're 4 weeks in and you get your project done, you've got 2 weeks of free time. However, if you took 2 weeks of free time, you've only got 4 weeks to get a 6 week project done. One of those I didn't choose when I was in school, I'll be very honest. But one of those is a much easier path that I just decided not to walk down. But I'm trying to say it's the same thing. It's the same problem we've all been experiencing all of our lives, except this one has much bigger implications because if you give up your flexibility, maybe you're giving up your peace of mind. Okay, my working spouses. What if you give up the time now, you wait and you shouldn't have, and now you've got more pressure in the future because you have to catch up. because you're the working spouse. And if retirement's coming, it's coming on your back. But you've given up too much time, and now the math again is your burden. My stay-at-home spouses, well, what if the math gets way out of whack and staying at home loses out as a functionality and we have to go back to work, or the math actually doesn't equate out the right way? That's what's at risk. And I don't mean to sound scary. I'm definitely not trying to scare anybody. That's just the game that we're playing if we leave the car in park and if we don't take action now. So, key takeaways from this section: saving for retirement earlier rather than later gives you potentially more choices in the future. It gives you more choices in general, and it takes those options and puts them more so in your favor. It's kind of a double edged good thing. I would say double edged sword. What's it called when there's two factors, but they're both in your favor? That's not a double edged sword because that's where they're both not in your favor.
Right. I don't know. I didn't
Well,
know there was gonna be a pop quiz today. Oh, no.
sorry, but it's important to realize you're giving up the double benefit, the options and the options being in your favor by standing still. So practical steps. I tell a lot of my clients, automate your savings. Don't don't have a great plan in 2020 whatever, but it requires your manual intervention. Now, automate your savings, moving it from account to account. We can talk about how many accounts or what style of personal banking system you're going to have, but really automate it as much as you can. Take it off of your mental plate so you have less things to think about. I also want people to try to maximize their employer match. If your employer's got a 2, 3, 4% match because you put in 2, 3, 4%, well, if you've got $10 and then somebody gives you $10, that is a doubling of your money. We I will recommend you double your money as often as you can when somebody else is helping contribute to it. That's one of the benefits of having an employee employer relationship, is that the employer can contribute to your retirement accounts. That's a great thing to be doing. Last piece is just set clear retirement goals. When my son was younger, he was drawing in the back of the car, and I like to get him the toys that I played with when I was a kid. And so we got him a Magnadoodle with like the little pin, the blue frame, and like you draw, can't get high detail or whatever. But he was drawing something in the back of the car, and I said, "Hey, Parker, what are you drawing?" And he said, "I don't know. I'm not done yet." And I was thinking, could you imagine if that was your financial plan? Of like, I don't know because I haven't figured it out. If you don't know where you're going, you're definitely not going to get there. Or maybe if you don't know where you're going, you'll definitely get there, as in you'll get nowhere because you have no plan. It's very important that we sit down and put together a rough outline, a high level outline. Previous episodes, episode 4, all around cash flow. That's going to be a good episode to say, what does a plan look like? What kind of details are important in a plan? Having a cash flow and then having an understanding of what you want to be doing in retirement. And what I say about retirement is just doing what you want, when you want, where you want, with who you want. So maybe that's some homework. I know, Wendy, you kind of bust me up because I give a lot of homework, but let's just say that's the homework for this portion of the episode. What do you want to do? When do you want to do it? Where do you hope to do it? And who do you want to do it with? If you can answer those questions, then the math gets a lot easier because we understand what we're trying to do.
So, let me ask you this, though. Um, I think it's kind of we automatically assume and hope that people are gonna take part in the 401(k) program, right? Through their employer. So, are we encouraging to save in addition to that?
Well, I think now we're back to the car drive, right? And this is math. It's all I say. Saving for retirement is just math. That's the good part. It's just math. If we change the inputs, we'll get a different output. If we don't like the outputs, we just change the inputs. So where I can't categorically say you need to be saving more than what your employer is matching, what we can talk about is if you start saving early enough, then there is a potential that your needed retirement savings never gets to a point where it really affects your day to day lifestyle. Okay. If you get enough compound interest on your side, again, by leveraging more time, there's a chance that that is so far in your favor that your lifestyle doesn't change on a month to month, year to year basis to your detriment because you have to take more of your money and put it into retirement. Now, part of that's dependent on what do you want to do, when do you want to do it, who do you want to do it with, and where do you want to be doing it. Part of it's dependent on that. But the other part is how much have you tried to put the math in your favor? How early have you started? How much have you set aside? And that's not to shirk the answer. It's just it's a little bit more complicated than just giving blanket statements. And that's why you can't just go to TikTok and watch 2.5 videos and think you're a financial planner. It is slightly more complicated than that. And if you want to read more about that, you can download my ebook called "What the Heck Are You Thinking," which was written because my friends kept going to YouTube and watching 1.5 YouTube videos and then reading or watching 3 TikToks and thinking, oh, I'm ready to tackle this retirement planning thing. Again, ebook, go to the website. You can download that. It'll be in the show notes. That kind of walks you through why it's more complicated than that. But switching into the next part of the episode, right? It's what happens if we don't? What happens if we continue waiting? What happens if we continue delaying or giving ourselves excuses, even good excuses, right? I make room for good excuses. That's fine. They do exist. Waiting too long actually forces us on this car drive to speed and potentially take riskier routes from here to retirement. So I did a little bit of math on the driving of a long drive. As in, let's say we're going to go on a road trip and it's 600 miles from start to finish and we think it's going to take 10 hours to get there. Okay, then you need an average speed of 60 miles an hour. 600 divided by 10, 60 miles an hour. Okay, now if you start leaving late, your average speed starts increasing. And this is where things get a little bit tricky. Okay, if you leave an hour late, you have to drive 11% faster. If you leave 2 hours late, you have to drive 25% faster. And like if you leave 5 hours late, you have to drive twice as fast as you would have driven if you had left on time.
120, no problem.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll just do 120 miles an hour for 5 hours straight. It's not going to be a big deal.
Won't be a
Why are
problem.
we laughing? Right? We're laughing because we know that there's these things called speed limits. And where I introduce that into this metaphor, this speed limit is the part that we're not in control of. We are in control of when do we leave the house? When do we get in the car? When do we start the drive? We know a lot of the information, especially if we've answered the, household cash flow retirement questions that I just assigned to everybody. I know you've gotten that homework done by now. Great job. If we take those two things and we mash it together, we kind of know how this road drive is going to look. We kind of know how fast we need to be driving, so to speak. But there are these speed limits, and that's the problem. Driving at 120 miles an hour when there is a speed limit that you are not in control of, I think we can put that in the risky category. Now, the speed limit when it comes to saving for retirement, that's the market returns. Your investments, your portfolio, doesn't matter what kind of accounts they are. If you lump them all together, that's your portfolio, big or small, that's your portfolio is going to have a rate of return that you are probably not in control of. And so if you have math, making it up, if you're the math that you've given yourself necessitates a 10% average return, but your investments only give you a 7, that math is not in your favor. And we're not in control, right? The weatherman doesn't make the rain. He just tells you that it might rain.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure.
And that's really important for us to realize is that okay, fine, yes, can somebody sit down and find me a different set of investments that can earn 10% instead of 7%? I'm sure somebody can. I'm sure somebody could look at something and deduce a portfolio that could yield you 10%. But those 10%, that 10% portfolio might have more inherent risk than you want to bear as a person. We all have different levels of risk that we're willing to take. And I try to talk a lot about striking a balance between needed risk and needless risk. As in, if you need 7%, we might not invest to get 10% because that is taking needless risk. But if you have a portfolio in math that necessitates the 7% return, that's your needed level of risk. We do need to create a portfolio that is going to average out to 7% returns. But the speed limit piece is what we're not in control of. But it's a very important factor on this road drive. Okay. And again, if we talked about rushing around and making riskier decisions, who is signing up for that? If two options are in front of you, and one is, hey, let's a little bit longer, a little bit slower, a little bit more room for wisdom to sink in, or let's wait and rush around and make risky decisions. Which one do we think we might choose if we're given the choice? And like newsflash, that is the choice in front of you right now. That is what is actually in front of you, whether you're aware of it or not. That's the choice you're allowed to make. And every day that we decide not to take action is choosing the second option, is choosing delay, is choosing risk, is choosing give up control, what little we have, give up the power, take it and put it in somebody else's hands. I just want to make sure that people understand that. Choosing to delay is choosing the second option. And what is the impact of choosing to delay on both spouses? Well, on the working spouse, we talked about it a little bit, but what if the math really shifts and now you actually need more money to go into your retirement accounts? Well, how can we get more money? Well, we can work longer.
What?
Okay, so now we're delaying retirement. Is that
Oh,
what we want to do?
no.
Okay, well if we okay, so we don't want to delay retirement, so we need to have more income. Well, how do most people earn income? They trade what for money?
Time.
Yes. Do you desire to be trading more of your time to earn more money when you actually probably want to spend that time with your family?
Right.
Well, no, that doesn't sound great either. Like, as you play this out in your head, there are probably no future options that are more desirable than getting started today.
Right.
Even though getting started means you have to do the homework of, well, how much money are we spending? And how much do we need to spend? And what can we cut back on? And how can we invest that money for our future selves? But another newsflash, that equation, that math has to be done even if you wait. But if you wait, let's say we wait 10 years, like the person in the example, person B from the example earlier, you still have to figure out how much money are we spending? How much money do we need to spend? But you're probably looking for a larger chunk of money. Now we're talking about actual lifestyle changes, possibly because you need to take a larger chunk of money. Now you've had 10 years to get used to a lifestyle that you are then having to give up because you accidentally spent money that you should have been saving for retirement in the first place. And so your homework is actually even more complicated because you waited even further in the future because there's less options. If we do our homework today, we have more options to choose from. We have more things that we can choose. If we wait to the future, the options start fading away and we're just left with a more rigid assignment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because you're saying I either have to continue to work or I have to reduce my lifestyle, and I don't want either one of those choices.
Yeah, and I did forget one. So it's either because to get the math back into your favor to allow retirement to happen, you either have to work longer. We don't want to do that. Or we need to earn more income. But I want to give my time to my family. My family is very important to me. Okay, well, the last thing is to just do less in retirement. At the end of the day, Wendy, what's in front of us is the choice of starting today or starting tomorrow. And just again, I think we've all been on that road trip of we needed to leave 2 hours ago, and so we know that the next 10 hours are going to be really stressful. And that's what we're doing every time where we take that can and we kick it down the road. That's every day we make that decision. We're just saying, you know what I want to do? I want to be more stressed in the future. I want the math to be less in my favor, less in my control. I want less variables that work in my favor. That's really what we're saying. And if you leave this episode knowing at least what is it where you move from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence,
Yeah.
like that's so much better than being unconsciously incompetent. I hope that at minimum somebody moves into the realm of conscious incompetence, which that's just like this really funny scale of understanding your situation. I'm not making fun of anybody or anything like that.
No, no, but, but then you're gonna be in a situation where you realize you're doing something wrong if you're not taking this advice.
Yes, and that's just that is so much better than not knowing you're doing something wrong and thinking you're doing something right.
Right.
At least if you are consciously making a bad decision, you're consciously making it. And that I'm not saying that that's great. I'm not condoning that, but at least consciously making a bad decision. It's so much better than thinking you're making good decisions and accidentally setting yourself up for failure. But what can help people along this journey? There's a couple things that I like to offer. We talked about the ebook. If anybody wants the ebook, that's going to be in the show notes. I'd love for you to download that. It follows Peyton and Jordan. They're a fictional couple that kind of walk through some of the things that could very realistically happen to your family. And I wrote it for you, and it is free for you. I want nothing standing in the way of you learning and moving into areas of competency. Another item that I give away to anybody who wants it is creating the asset map. So if you want to know where you stand, you can go to my website. You can create a free item called an asset map. Now, imagine if what came out of a printer, one piece of paper, was your financial life organized into inflows, outflows, protections, all of that stuff, all of your assets on one piece of paper, seen from like a 30,000-foot top down view. That is something that I am more than happy to prepare for anybody through a software that I have called Asset Map. And then I'll jump back into previous episodes. If this is your first time on this podcast, some more information would be very helpful. Episode 4, talking about cash flow. Some of the other episodes where we're talking about the math of retirement and how you actually get from here to retirement without giving up your entire lifestyle. Those are all things that you can go and find in previous episodes. And Wendy, I think that wraps us up.
All right. Well, that sounds great. Mark, how do people get in touch with you?
The best way is to use the email address that's going to be in the show notes. So I would just jump down there, click it. It should take you straight to composing an email. Shoot me any comments, concerns you have, finance or podcast related. I love to hear from people. And again, it's the feedback of the listeners where this episode came from. So if you have actual questions that you want to hear answered, I love getting the feedback. So please let me know.
All right. And what is the website address?
Website address is second-comma.com. Or if you go to Google and type in second comma, it's the only one that has nothing to do with grammar. And luckily that makes it stand out. So a couple different ways to get to the website. But if you just Google second comma, it's the only one that's not about grammar.
All right. Sounds good. Well, thank you for listening today. Please like, follow, and share this podcast with your friends. Until next time.